Racist neighbor calls cops on my disabled son. Huge mistake. Wow, what a wild ride. Can you believe how things turned out? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Globe showing Europe Africa sparkles, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got another jaw-dropping tale coming your way tomorrow. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. See you in the next one. Fire Eyes. When my family and I moved into our new home in a quiet Texas suburb, we were filled with excitement and hope. It was a dream come true, a beautiful house in a safe neighborhood with great schools for our 8-year-old son, Lucas. My wife, Emily, and I had worked hard to afford this home, and we were eager to build a happy life here. But from the moment we arrived, it became painfully clear that not everyone in the neighborhood was thrilled about our presence. And at the center of it all was Linda, our 55-year-old next-door neighbor. Linda wasn't just any neighbor, she was the self-appointed gatekeeper of the community, the kind of person who believed she had the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. From the very first day, she made it clear that we weren't welcome. She didn't bother introducing herself or offering a polite greeting like most neighbors would. Instead, she stood in her yard, arms crossed, watching us with a cold, judgmental glare. At first, I thought maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe she was just an unfriendly person in general. But it didn't take long to realize that Linda wasn't just rude, she was racist. My family is Chinese American, and while we had lived in different parts of the country, we had never experienced anything quite like this. The neighborhood was predominantly white, and to Linda, that was how it should stay. The first time she spoke to us, her words left me stunned. She walked over, eyeing us up and down with clear disapproval. Then, with a dismissive tone, she asked, "Are you the cleaners? When are the real homeowners arriving?" For a moment, I was speechless. Cleaners? She couldn't even fathom that we owned this home. Taking a deep breath, I forced a smile and responded, "Actually, we are the homeowners." Her face twisted in disbelief. She blinked rapidly as if trying to process what I had just said. Then, instead of an apology, she scoffed. "Oh," she muttered, barely hiding her disappointment. "This isn't really the kind of neighborhood for people like you." That was the moment I knew we were in for a nightmare. From that day on, Linda made it her personal mission to make our lives miserable. She complained to the HOA about everything. Our trash cans weren't pulled in fast enough, our grass was too long, even though it wasn't, our car was parked an inch too far from the curb. But the worst part was how she treated our son, Lucas. Lucas was born with a disability and wears black leg braces to help him walk. Despite his challenges, he's a fighter, and nothing makes him happier than playing soccer in our front yard. But every time Linda saw him, she would glare with disgust, as if his mere presence offended her. It was clear, Linda didn't just hate that we lived here. She hated that we existed at all. And soon, things would only get worse. After weeks of dealing with Linda's nasty stares and endless HOA complaints, I thought I had seen the worst of her. I was wrong. Because the moment she turned her attention to my son, things took a turn for the worse. Lucas, my 8-year-old, is the kind of kid who lights up a room. He's strong, determined, and full of life. He was born with a disability, something the doctors told us would keep him from ever walking on his own. But Lucas proved them wrong. With his black braces strapped around his legs, he worked harder than any kid his age to walk, to run, and most of all, to play soccer. Every afternoon, rain or shine, he would kick his soccer ball across our front yard, his face glowing with joy. It was his favorite thing to do, a symbol of his perseverance, his freedom. But to Linda, It was a problem. Every time she saw him playing, her face would twist with irritation. She'd huff as she walked past, shake her head, and sometimes even mutter under her breath. It was as if the simple sight of a happy child enjoying himself was offensive to her. One afternoon, just before dinner, I was in the kitchen, watching Lucas through the window. His friends had already gone home, but he was still out there, kicking the ball, determined to get in one last goal before calling it a night. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the yard. It should have been a peaceful moment. But then, I heard her. Linda's voice cut through the air like nails on a chalkboard. "Hey! Stop that right now," she snapped. I saw Lucas freeze, his little hands gripping the soccer ball. He looked confused, unsure if she was really talking to him. "What are you doing out here, making a mess?" she continued, stepping closer to our yard. I felt my stomach twist. I could already see where this was going. Lucas, ever the polite kid, simply said, "I'm just playing soccer." Linda let out a dramatic sigh, shaking her head like he had just confessed to committing a crime. "You people are always causing trouble," she muttered. "This isn't a playground. You don't belong here." I was already moving, about to step outside and put an end to this nonsense, when suddenly, she did something I never expected. She pulled out her phone. I couldn't hear everything she was saying, but when the words "suspicious person" and "damaging property" left her lips, my blood ran cold. She was calling the police. On my 8-year-old son. I bolted for the front door. By the time I reached Lucas, he was running toward me, his face pale with fear. "Dad," he cried, "she's calling the cops on me." Linda stood there, arms crossed, a smug grin on her face. She had done it. She had actually called 911 on a child, for playing in his own front yard. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. But as the distant sound of sirens filled the air, I knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. The police arrived within minutes. 4 squad cars pulled up to my house, lights flashing, making it look like a crime scene. I had no idea what Linda had told them, but from the way she stood there, arms crossed with a smug grin, I knew she thought she had one. One of the officers approached me, while another went straight to Linda, pulling out a notepad. "Ma'am, what seems to be the issue?" Linda puffed up her chest like she was about to deliver the crime of the century. "That little Asian brat," she spat, pointing at Lucas, "was destroying public property." I felt my stomach twist. But before I could even process the sheer audacity of her words, she took it even further. She used a slur. A disgusting, demeaning slur to describe my son and his disability. The officers froze. So did I. Up until that moment, I had known Linda was a hateful, bitter person, but this was a new level of cruelty. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. She wanted me to explode, to lose control so she could play the victim. Not today. One of the officers, clearly unimpressed, glanced at the sidewalk where she was pointing. Scattered across the pavement were colorful chalk drawings, stick figures, flowers, a smiling sun, the kind of innocent doodles kids make every day. The officer sighed, rubbing his temples. "Ma'am, this isn't vandalism," he said flatly. "This is chalk. It'll wash away with the next rain." Linda's face turned red. But it makes the neighborhood look trashy," she snapped. The officer shook his head. "There's no crime here." I could see the moment reality hit her, her plan had failed. Furious, she stomped back to her house, muttering under her breath. But I knew this wasn't the end. And I was right. The next morning, I stepped outside, expecting a normal day, but instead, I found an empty space where my car had been. At first, panic surged through me. Had it been stolen? My mind raced, trying to piece together what had happened. And then, like a gut punch, the realization hit me. Linda. I stormed over to her house, my heart pounding. I pounded on her door, not with the polite knock of a neighbor, but with the force of someone who had had enough. After a long pause, the door creaked open just enough for her to peek through. She didn't even try to look innocent. If anything, she looked annoyed. "What do you want?" she snapped. I didn't waste time. "Where's my car, Linda?" My voice was low, controlled, but filled with fury. "I know you had something to do with this." She smirked. "Oh, that," she said, arms crossing over her chest. "I had it towed. Maybe next time you'll learn not to park in front of my house." I took a sharp breath, my hands shaking with rage. That was it. The final straw. Linda had gone too far. And this time, I was going to make her pay. I stood there, staring at Linda, my fists clenched at my sides. She had just admitted to having my car towed, her smug expression making it clear that she thought she had one. But what she didn't realize was that this time, she had messed with the wrong person. I wasted no time. I called the towing company and quickly found out the truth. Linda hadn't gone through any legal process to have my car removed. Instead, she had a friend in the towing business who did it as a personal favor. That made it highly illegal. With this information in hand, I filed an official complaint. Within days, the company was slapped with a massive fine, and Linda was forced to cover every penny of the towing and impound fees, plus the cost of the cab rides I had to take to work. Watching her hand over that money was satisfying, but it still wasn't enough. I wanted to end this once and for all. Then, I found the perfect way to do it. You see, Linda strutted around like she owned the neighborhood, acting as if she had control over who lived there. But there was one crucial detail she never expected me to find out: she didn't even own her house. That's right. Linda was just a renter. And for someone who acted like she ruled the entire neighborhood, that fact was almost too good to be true. I had been in real estate for years, and so had my wife, Emily. We knew exactly how to make things happen. It didn't take long to track down the actual owner of the house Linda was renting. Once I had him on the phone, I made an offer he couldn't refuse, a very attractive cash deal. Money talks. Within weeks, the paperwork was finalized, and we became the new owners of the very house Linda had been renting. The best part? In our state, if a new owner takes over a rental property, they have the right to decide whether or not to renew the lease. And guess what? Linda's lease wasn't getting renewed. The moment I had the legal documents in hand, I drafted a 30-day notice to vacate. She had 1 month to pack up and leave. When she saw the eviction notice taped to her front door, I got exactly the reaction I was hoping for. Within hours, my phone rang. Linda was desperate, scrambling to understand what was happening. At first, she was polite, too polite. "Hi, I was just hoping to speak with the new owners," she chirped, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "I've been such a great tenant, and I'd love to discuss my lease renewal." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. "Of course," I said, keeping my tone just as fake as hers. "Let's meet and discuss it." She had no idea that her worst nightmare was about to come true. The day of the meeting arrived, and I was ready. I held the eviction notice in my hand, the final nail in the coffin for Linda's reign of terror. My wife, Emily, and I walked up to the house, our house now, and spotted Linda waiting on the porch. She was standing there, arms crossed, her face twisted in irritation, probably thinking she could sweet-talk her way out of this. But the second she saw us, everything changed. Her smug expression vanished, replaced by pure shock. Her eyes darted between me and Emily, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to process what she was seeing. "You," she spat, her voice dripping with disgust. "You own this house?" I held up the paperwork with a satisfied smile. "That's right, Linda. We're your new landlords." For a second, she was frozen, like her brain couldn't compute what was happening. Then, like a dam breaking, she exploded. "I will not have Asian people as my landlords," she shrieked, her face turning a deep, ugly red. "I can't live here. I'll get sick just breathing the same air as you." The neighbors had started to gather, drawn in by the commotion. Some stood on their porches, others peeked through blinds, watching the spectacle unfold. Linda, too blinded by her own hatred, didn't even notice. But before I could even respond, she did something unthinkable. She lunged, fist flying through the air, and punched Emily square in the face. The impact was sickening. My wife stumbled back, clutching her jaw in shock. The entire street went dead silent. That was it. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The moment Linda realized what I was doing, she panicked. Her fury shifted into desperation as she whipped around to face the neighbors, her arms flailing. "They're trying to break into my house," she shrieked, voice reaching a new level of delusion. "These dirty Asians are trying to take my home." The gasps from the crowd told me everything I needed to know. She had just sealed her fate. Moments later, the Real police arrived. Linda immediately launched into full victim mode, waving her hands wildly. "Officers! Arrest them! They're trespassing." But I stayed calm. I simply handed over the paperwork. "Actually," I said smoothly, "this is our house now. And my wife would like to press charges." The officers barely hesitated. "Ma'am," one said, stepping toward her, "turn around and put your hands behind your back." Linda's eyes went wide. "Wait, no! They're lying," she screeched. But it was too late. The handcuffs clicked, and just like that, Linda was hauled away like the criminal she was. And by the time the sun set that evening, her belongings were being dumped onto the curb. Linda was gone. And I had never felt more victorious. Can you believe the audacity of Linda? From calling the cops on an 8-year-old to illegally towing a car, and then having the nerve to attack someone, she got exactly what she deserved. But now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever had a nightmare neighbor like Linda? Maybe someone who thought they ruled the neighborhood, complained about every little thing, or even tried to make your life miserable? Tell us your craziest neighbor stories in the comments. We love reading your experiences, and who knows, maybe your story could be featured in a future video. Also, let us know where you're watching from. Globe showing Europe, Africa. We have an amazing community from all over the world, and we'd love to see who's tuning in. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss tomorrow's story. It's one you won't want to miss. Fire. Now, drop your comments below, and let's talk about this wild ride together. Down arrow.